should have the Beitza Mikdash immediately. For Shlomo, for everyone that needs. For Joe Green, for Yechiel Nassim Ben Sarah, and David Alevi, Ben Menucha Adel Esther. Okay, we're on Lamates. Almost finished there. Lamates Amid Aleph on the top. Rabbi Yehuda Paiter B'Mayim. 39? Yeah, 39a. Rabbi Yehuda says that if there's a combination of ingredients that belong to different people, and then you have an issue of tchumen, that how far can this cake or tavshel travel on Yom Tov because it has different owners, because the ingredients belong to different people. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that you can ignore the water. The water doesn't matter. So where it says mayim in melach loy, you see, but what about the salt? The salt, Rabbi Yehuda didn't say that you can ignore. He just says you can ignore the water because the water is not really substantial. We're saying like the water is bottle here. Yeah, that was our discussion on Friday about the bittul. But Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda mayim umelach betelen bein beisa bein bekdeira. We have a brisa that says the salt is bottle. It doesn't fit with the Mishnah that says only the water is bottle. Where it says like kasha. Habamelach sedaimis, habamelach is tzuruknes. Depends what type of salt. There's a thicker salt and a thinner salt. The thin salt, melach sedaimis, that is bottle. Melach sedaimis was the salt that we're concerned about for mayim achreinim. It gets stuck on the fingers. Concerned someone may touch their eye afterwards.
This is the thinner salt.
That's the thinner one. But yeah, it's what you don't see that's the problem. Right. Right. And the melach is tzuruknes is
Cave salt and rock salt.
Oh, is that how he says it?
Yeah, well, that's how
No.
it says it over here.
Oh.
What is the phrase again? Cave salt and what's the first again?
Cave.
Cave, C-A-V-E.
Yeah, like salt mines.
Yeah.
And the other one would be probably
Rock
sea
salt.
salt.
Well, the salt says brings a photo of like that.
Oh.
One,
Maybe those are just two. That doesn't mean it's sedaimus. Sedaimus is a sea salt, right? Okay. Well, they asked this kid. They said it says in one place melach sedaimus reiva. And we say in Pita Makteris. But in the pasuk it says the melach sedaimus bera. The king of Sedaim was his name was Bera. Why are you saying melach sedaimus? That this was? They said, yeah, when Sedaim got turned over, so then letters Reiva turned into Bera. Okay, so Tanya, well, we have a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Mayim melach betelim beisa, bein betelim bekdeira, pnei reitva." We're saying now that the water is not bottled in a kedera. What did we say over here? What are we talking about over here? We're talking about an isa. Melech leisa. Rabbi Yehuda is paiter b'mayim. Yeah, even though the Mishnah said isa, but it wasn't mechalik. He's paiter b'mayim. And so what's going on? Over here it says ein betelim b'kedera. We're talking about the difference between a dough or a stew. If it's a stew, then it's not bottled because the water is still there. It's like a chalent. And it says like kasha ba'ava baracha. It depends how thick the chalent is. If it's a thick chalent, then the water's bottled. And if it's not a thick chalent, then it's a stew, then the water's not bottled. It's like a soup. Yeah. So then you can't say the water's bottled in the soup. Okay. I have a new Mishnah now. Hagacheles kiragle habaylim shall have us b'chol makim. Say there's a coal. So the coal can't be carried by anyone. It has to stay in the possession in the 2,000 amos limit of the owner. But the flame, that's not restricted like that. Okay, that's halacha number one. Gacheles shel hektish. Say there's a coal of hektish, it's consecrated, belongs to the temple. Mayalimba, there's me'ila in that. And as you can't use that coal for personal use. Vishal heves, in the flame. Lainen and v'leimailin. Originally, you shouldn't be using it. But if you do, there's no me'ila. Me'ila is using consecrated items for personal use, with a punishment for that. As if it's b'shoigig, there's a carbon, and you have to bring a chatas, carbon asham, and there's also malchus. So malchus. No, you have to add a chaimish to the payment. And if it's b'mezeh, then it's misa b'dei shemaim. So me'ila is a very strict thing. We're saying over here that on the flame there's no me'ila, but there isn't a prohibition of using the flame.
So like if they use it for something
other than
carbon itself, like Bodhizara or something.
Well, no, it doesn't. It means that you just go over and someone lights a cigarette off it.
Oh, okay.
So you light your candle off it. So that you can't use. I always see people on Yantif going and taking the yard sites, to light the cigarette from the show candles. Yeah, it does look a little bit like irreverent, but could be it's acceptable. If someone carries a coal out into the public area from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, this is carrying on Shabbos. So coal is something of substance and he's chayav. How shall have a spatter? If he just carries out the flame, now how does he get a flame without a coal? We'll have to see. But if he just carries out the flame, then he's going to be exempt. Okay. We have three halachas. We have a tchum halacha, where we differentiate between the coal and the flame. We have a hektish halacha, and then we have a carrying on Shabbos halacha, all about the differentiating between the coal and the flame. Tana Rabbanan. Now we have a Beitza. Chamisha dvarim nemru b'gachelas. We have 5. Mishnah only had 3. The Beitza adds another 2. Hagachelas karagli abaylim shall have a b'chol makim. Okay, that we had in the Mishnah. That when it comes to tchum, the gachelas is owned by the coal is owned by the owner, but the shalheves can go, the flame can go wherever someone takes it. That means if he lights a candle off it, it's not restricted. Gachelas shall hektish mayolamba. A coal of hektish, there's me'ila, like we said, there's a carbon, a sham me'ilis. The shalheves loy nenev maylam, but the flame, l'chatchila you can't use, but there's no me'ila. And okay, now here comes avodah zarah. Gachelas shel avodah zarah, a coal of idol worship. Maybe there was some sort of sacrifice to idols that was going on. There's a coal that's left over. So asura, you're not allowed to use that. Shall have a smateris, but the flame is acceptable. That's interesting.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to see. It's not. It's a little
How do you
bit.
separate
It's a little bit in
coal.
Yeah, but it would mean that I can't use the coal to put it on like something. If I needed the coal, for iron or something, but the flame itself would be acceptable. It's a little bit inconsistent.
Well,
because hektish had a isser derabanan at least, and lahavdil the avodah zarah doesn't have any prohibition. We'll see in the Gemara. Consecrated items. Hamitzi gachelas l'reshus harabim chayev. If you carry a coal, you chayev on Shabbos into a public area. But shall have a spatter. Shall have us, you're exempt. Yeah, it's ignoring that maybe you shouldn't be moving the coal anyway. That's not the muktzeh aspect. It's the carrying aspect that we're dealing with. If you move a flame, that you're going to be exempt. How do you move the flame without the coal? Again, well, the Gemara is going to explain. Yeah, a Jewish person is able to forbid himself or forbid his own items from someone else from having benefit. Just like a person can make something hektish, and say that my items are consecrated. He can also make his items non-usable. Does that mean that he makes his own items not usable, or it means that he says he doesn't want to have benefits from his friend? Either way, he can have benefit from the coal, but he can use his flame. The flame is not really something of substance. Okay. Now the Gemara says, we mentioned this while we were learning it, that it's inconsistent. When it came to Avodah Zarah, you're allowed to use the flame. When it came to Hekdesh, you're not allowed to use the flame. At least, Lachatchila. Gemara answers, Avodah Zarah demi'isa b'dili and sheminei legosu b'Rabbanan. See, Avodah Zarah is disgusting. No one's going to come, if we let you use the flame, you're going to use the coal. No one's going to say that. But by Hekdesh, the leimas, leibedili and sheminei gosu b'Rabbanan, there's a gzeira. So it's a rabbinic decree, because it's a slippery slope. You start using this, you're going to end up using that.
So when something's hektish, does that mean they just use that flame for a different purpose?
Right.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's us or
right.
Or
yeah, it's personal use. Right. If someone carries out a coal into Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, he's chayiv. But if he carries a flame, he's pater. Again, we said, well, how's he carrying a flame? We have a brisa that says the flame, if he carries a flame, is chayiv. Now you're telling me he carries a flame, is pater. This is the Mishnah said and the brisa said. We're going to have Rav Sheshes a few times today. He carried it on a match.
Not sure if I missed it, but why are we talking here about Shabbos?
Well, we're talking about coals. When we mentioned a coal, if it has the limitations of tchum on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov you're allowed to carry, but once we differentiate between coals and the flame, so we also mentioned the difference between coals and flame regarding carrying, which is Shabbos, because on Yom Tov you wouldn't have that issue of carrying. So it has to be explained that it's Shabbos. Now we're saying to resolve a brisa, a contradiction between a brisa and the Mishnah. Carrying a flame is chayiv, carrying a flame is pater. So we answered the one that says chayiv, which is the brisa that's referring to that it's attached to a match, so it has more substance. The tebeklei mishum kesem. So why aren't you chayiv for carrying the match? Why are you saying you're only chayiv for the flame if there's a match attached? Yeah, this is like this guy that I stole a rope. He said, well, okay, so give it back. He says, no, the rope was attached to the horses. He says, okay, so give the horses back. But the horses were carrying a wagon. We're pulling a wagon. This case, I give he didn't say the story. They say the end of the story was not a good story. So, but anyway, so you're telling me Yechayev for the Shalheves, but there's a match attached. So why don't you say Yechayev because he carried the match? It says B'dalesle Shiura. The match wasn't big enough to be Chayev. Tanan Hamaitzi Eitzim Kedei Levashel Beitza Kala about Hamaitzi Kedei Levashel Beitza Kala. That I have a shear of how much wood is considered carrying. As if I walk outside and there's some lint on my garment that I didn't carry. There's one seed that's in the cuff of my the hem, the cuff of the pants. It's not considered carrying. It has to be a certain amount. What's the amount? Gregorus usually, or if it's food, or Gregorus is the dried fig, right?
I didn't know there was a size in which
it has to be something of substance. Yeah, well, it's not that you're allowed to carry, but it's not considered chayiv unless it's something of substance. Yeah, so we're middle of Lamites. So here the match is too thin. It's not enough to cook an egg. Which type of egg? It says it's a chicken egg. We're talking about that it's actually oil that's burning in a pan. You put oil in the pan, and then then he lit it on fire and he's carrying that. So now he's chayav because of the pan. Well, no, he's chayav because of the fire. The Gemara asks, but so why isn't he chayav because of the pan? So it says bechaspa. The pan is cheres. It's earthenware. Well, but typically mishum chaspa. So why don't you chayav because cheres is also not allowed to carry earthenware, clay. So it's a bit less sure. You don't have a full measurement over there. It's too small. The Tanan cheres kedei litin bein patzim lachaveri divrei Rabbi Yehuda. What would the clay be used for? If there were beams that were being laid down, you would have to make it even. You would put these between this cheres between it to make it even. So it was little like chips, cheres chips. So this was small, too small for that. So you wouldn't be chayiv. So okay. What we just did was we just said that when you're chayiv for carrying a flame, it's because there's something attached to it, but that thing is too small. But the flame now becomes significant, and you're chayiv because of the flame. Taisus has an interesting question. Taisus asks, we know that it's possible to say bittul. If someone carries food less than a shear in a utensil, so the utensil is bottled to the food, and the food he's pater on, he ends up that he's pater. So if someone is carrying a flame in a vessel attached to something, the vessel should be bottled to the flame, and the flame he should be pater on, because the flame is nothing. Why isn't he pater? Taisva says that when they have, you get what's happening? Food in a cake. Right. No, I'm not being the bottle of the flame. Hey, let's say like this. Let's say you carry a baby in a stroller or something on Shabbos. The baby is the main thing. The stroller, but I have a rule that the baby is alive. I shouldn't be chayav. So I ended up on pater for everything here. The carrying the live person, I'm exempt, but the stroller is not alive, but the stroller is bottled to the person. The same thing is with food. You have food in a utensil. If the food is not a shear, the utensil is bottled to the food. And when I carry it out, I'm pater because I didn't carry enough food in the utensil, which should have been something, but it's bottled to the. If I would have carried it out empty, that would have been chayiv. But because it's carrying this food, that's not a shear. So why over here, when I'm carrying a keli, the Gemara is suggesting, oh, you should be chayiv because of the keli. We have to say that the keli is also too small. Why does it have to be too small? The keli is bottled to the shalheves, to the flame, and the flame he's pater on. Like we said, you pater on the flame. So Taisva says that the flame is not significant as the food to make something secondary to it. The food can make the keli bottle to it, but the flame is not significant enough to get something bottled to it. Anyway, that's what Taisva says. So what's going on over here? So we have carrying flames in either a keli or a small match. The Gemara now asks, then how do you carry a flame without anything?
That's what I was talking.
How do you carry a flame? The Gemara answers, going to Adi Adi Rishus Rabbim, you fanned it into the Rishus Rabbim, you blew it into the Rishus Rabbim. So I have a flame and right next to the window or something, or next to the door, or next to the edge of the Rishus, and I fan it and the flame goes shooting out into the Rishus Rabbim, it crosses the board. So I'm pater on it. Flamethrowers.
So if someone has a fire, fans the fire, and fire goes into someone else's rishus and now burns their house down, he's not chayav that he burned the house down.
He's chayav for burning the house down.
But he didn't cause the flame there.
No, okay. Here's what you're saying. why is the problem over here? And the reason why he's potter is not because he didn't carry it. The reason why he's potter is because the substance that he's carrying is not significant. There's in Malachas of Shabbos, it seems from this Gemara that you're chayiv whether you did it with your hands, whether you did it with your mouth, right? But with your kayach. If it would have been something else that I blew, like a spitball or something in a straw, Pushcart War. Remember that book? So I'd be chayiv because that's something. There was like a pea in the shooter. The problem is not that I blew it. The problem is that there was no substance there. You follow?
I'm just trying to understand, like, the word putter means you're liable? Or-
No, pater means that I'm not allowed to do it, but I'm exempt
Okay.
from any
Okay.
punishment. Okay, ready? We have a new Mishnah. Barshal Yachid. You have a pit, a cistern or something. It has water in it. Karaglia Yachid. It's a privately owned, so the limitations on that water go according to the owner. Let's say this is a reservoir or something of the city. Then then it goes according to the people of the city. Rashi learns it goes according to the city limits. Now, there's one detail that's missing here. What about someone that made an Erev? He belongs to that city, but he made an Erev. And so his city limits are different. Can he carry it? According to Rashi, he's limited to the city limits, and that's it. It's the city. There is no individuals over here. That's what. Not everyone learns like that.
It's like the
Right, right. But that fellow doesn't limit the entire city in this, which is interesting. Now, B'Shalei Bavel, Kiragli Hamamali. Early Bavel were the wells that were like the rest stops along the way from people that were Eila Regel. So there was water pits that were made for them to be able to drink for the animals also while they traveled. So that, because it's put there specifically for people that are traveling, it goes according to whoever fills it up. So if someone had an Erev, he had his tchum is in a certain location, and in the, I guess you would say the radius of this ends up 2,000 amas within those limits, so he can take it 2,000 amas the other side, right? Because he can go 2,000 amas in any direction. So it would be whoever fills it up. It's not just 2,000 amas from the well. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Rami le Rav Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman a question. Tanan. Barshal Yachid Karaglia Yachid. The private well goes according to the individual that owns it. Or a minnow, but we have a contradiction. That rivers and streams, it goes according to whoever fills it up. I think you could answer that that's a public, but the Gemara doesn't answer that. It makes a difference if it's stationary water or if it's flowing water. If it's flowing water, then it goes according to whoever fills it up. And if it's stationary water, then it belongs to the individual. We even have this stated clearly, that this Mishnah that talks about that it goes according to the person that owned that well, that's because the water is stationary water. We enter into a very interesting sugya. Very interesting. This is like crossing over boundaries in Shas. What's happening here is that there's a well that's like a rest area, and whoever fills it up whoever fills up water from that well, that water is limited only to his limitations. So it's as if it's put into place that they knew. It's sort of like Brera. And actually, it seems like Brera, that when Yom Tov came in, that water was already yours. And that's why it can go according to, right? That's what it sounds like. Or or the owner had in mind, we had this also, we had different cases, but the owner has in mind that you're coming tomorrow to take it. There was only one raya in the city or something. So the owner had that in mind before. So it goes according to the one that fills it out. Itmar. We have a statement. Mila v'nasan lachaveri. This is a type of question that you get in the classroom. Let's say one person filled it up, but he gave it to his friend to drink. He filled it up for his friend. Now, this person had made an eruv to that side. The one that he gave it to had made an eruv to that side. So was it the filling up of the water that puts the restrictions on it, and now it's stuck to this side? Or is it the one that it was intended for, where we gave it to, and it has the eruv of the one that he just handed it to? This is when the teacher says, no what if questions. No what if questions. You know, the students, they derail the teacher. What if the, okay. So with this, it turns out there's a machlekes. Reb Nachman Amakragli Mishin Esmalolai. Reb Nachman says it goes after the one that it was intended for. And Rav Sheshes Amakragli Mamal, it goes after the one that actually filled it up. What's the basis for their answers? So Mar Sava, the Gemara says, like, it has a suggestion right here. In the end, we're going to have another suggestion of what the machlekes is, but it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. Mar Savar Bira de Hefkerehu. You see, Rav Sheshes that says it goes after the one that fills it. He's using a law that we find in Bava Metzia. The rule over there is that you can't be taifas l'bal chayv v'makom shechav la'acherim. You can't grab. Let's say there's someone that has debts and he hasn't paid them back. So he has property that he's supposed to be used to pay them back. So if you're the creditor, you were the lender there, and you see the property, you can actually take the property and hold it, and evaluate or whatever if you know the value, and say, okay, if I'm taking that because of my loan that I lent you never paid me back. But let's say there's a third party there. The third party can't come in and grab that.
It's on behalf of someone else.
On behalf of someone else. The third party that's not even involved say, well, I know you owe money to my friend, and I see you driving that car, and I saw him get out and he left the keys there, so I'm just going to take the car and a debt collector. But it can't be a third party collecting, because there's other people. He owes to other people. He owes to other people also, and everyone has equal rights to that. But he only has one car.
He could technically take the whole thing. So like, this is for you, you, and you.
Oh, if it were taken for everyone, that could be different. But if he takes it for one person, then he's makam shechav la'acherim. There's other people here that could also do that, and you have no business doing that. Okay. What happens? The Gemara then in Bava Metzia discusses about magbiya metzia lachaveri. If there's an object on the ground, and one person wants to go and take it, but he doesn't take it for himself, which he can take it for himself because it's hefker, it's a yush or whatever. He could take that object. Whatever, something on the floor that's the person gave up hope. But let's say he, instead of taking it for himself, he takes it for someone else. He lifts it up for someone else. So the Gemara has a discussion. Is he allowed to do that? Because really the whole world has rights to that item equally. And if you didn't take it for yourself, if you took it for yourself, then fine. But if you take it for someone else, so you're actually removing it from everyone else's ability to take it, and you didn't even take it for yourself. You're like a third party in this. Comes to the well. Okay, now we have a well with water. Who owns that well? If the well is hefker, so then ownerless. So then when this one individual takes it, and he takes it for a third part, for someone else. So he can't do that. He can only take it for himself. So Rav Sheshes says it goes after the one that took it for himself. He says because the well was hefker. But Rav Nachman says, you know what? That well wasn't actually hefker. That well belongs to everyone. It's not hefker. Hefker means it belongs to no one. The whole world is partners in the well. And when you took it, you took your friend's portion. Everyone has a portion of this. You took your friend's portion and you gave it to him. It's not like you acquired something new for him. It was always his. So that's why it can go to him. The question is, what's the status of the well? Rav Nachman says that the status of the well is shutfim, partners. And Rav Sheshes says the status of the well is hefker. That would make the difference.
If this was a spring, none of this would apply.
What if
Because it
question?
came from
The
the house.
well is
No, what
limited
if,
supply, but the spring, people would, even if you took for someone else, there would still be more spring.
Could be. Could be. Right, a cistern. It's a collected water. Some sort of reservoir.
It's right, well, doesn't work, sir. This whole body doesn't work.
Why?
It's
because-
No, the guy drops a bucket and pulls up.
No, we're talking about here. It's not a private well, it's a public well. So even if the water is flowing, it's still a public well. The question is, that public well, is that considered public as ownerless or public as everyone owns it?
This is like taxation without representation. Right. But what does that public mean? Does it mean ownerless or the? Right. It's still not, it's not defined. Is it ownerless or is it everyone owns it? So Esvei, the Gemara asks, Esvei Rav or Rav Nachman. Rav asked the question on Rav Nachman. What he's going to come out with is that how can Rav Nachman say that the well belongs to, everyone is partners? How could you say that? It goes like this. He quotes a Mishnah in the Nedarim. Harini alecha cherem. All of my possessions are forbidden unto you. That's what the person says. Amudar aser. The person is not allowed to have any benefit from the person that spoke. Right? He forbade all his items. Hareyata alai cherem. Everything that you have is forbidden unto me. It means he makes the other person's items forbidden to him. So, then he can't have any benefit from that person. Now things get complicated. I mean, this is a classic Nedarim discussions. And basically a neder is something where the item becomes forbidden. And a Jew has the power to actually to create a prohibition on an item. Just like you can make it hektish. So, Harini alecha v'talai. Let's say he says, you're forbidden to me and I'm forbidden to you. So Shneim Asurim Zeh B'zeh. They're both forbidden from each other. There must have been some sort of fight. We're not getting the background. So you have to buy the other book. Umutarim b'shel oilei bavel. However, they're allowed to use, both of them, to use the wells of the oilei bavel, those public rest areas. Now, who owns those public rest areas? If I say they're ownerless, let's say Reuven and Shimon, right? They made this, they're in this fight. They said, Mudar atalai. And let's say if it's ownerless, then each one that goes to the well can take from the well. The other person has no connection to this. But if it's owned by everyone, then whose water is he taking? He's taking Shimon's water. I mean, like one millionth, but it's still partially Shimon's. But there's difference between Oile Bavel and the city. If there's a well in the city, then in the city, everyone owns that as partners. But the well of Oile Bavel, that everyone owns as Hefker. And not ever, they don't own it. They don't own it. Now, we already understand what the question is here. Rav Nachman said that Oile Bavel is Shutfim. And here we have it's very clear that this Mishnah refers to it as Hefker, as ownerless. Ve'elo ein dvarim shel oile bavel. What would be the things that are oile bavel? Well, the harabayas, halishkais, all of these are permissible to each of them. The chambers in the Beis Hamikdash, Azaris, the courtyards, ubar shalem taderach, and also the pits that were along the way, which we mentioned. Ve'elo ein shel or what are the things that belong to the city, which everyone is partners? That's the representation, taxation. Harachava, it's supposed to say. Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaMerchatz, that everyone owns together equally. If you say that it's owned as partners, why is it permissible? Rava completes his Batanan, but we have a Mishnah. If two partners forbid each other from having benefit from each other, they're not allowed to go into the courtyard. They're not allowed to go into the courtyard that they own together because they're having benefit from each other. So you see, they can't benefit from each other. So the question why we need that Mishnah, I mean, we already understood the whole story before we quoted that Mishnah. It's not adding a lot. The Rishonim asked that. Okay. So he has a question on Rav Nachman. They answer the question. Rav Nachman says, Lirchetz bebar hachinami. Over there, they're talking about where is it aser. If you want to go in to take a bath, you're going into that well to take a bath, then you're having benefit from every drop of water. But if you're just taking water out, which was what we were thinking about, that was the whole time, taking the water out, that should be permissible because you're only taking 1 cup of water. Now, but maybe that's the other person's cup. So for this, Rav Nachman would say Breira. Says no, the part that what I took is retroactive. That's the part that was always mine. But when I go in to bathe, then I'm using all the water over there, swishing,
What if the well was actually a mikveh? Would they change the story?
That's if it would be a mikveh, it would be the same issue. Yeah, that's the issue, that you wouldn't be allowed to go into it. Because when you go into it, you have enjoyments from the whole, all the water.
The whole purpose of the mikveh.
Right,
Because the purpose of the
right,
law was to-
right. But because you just forbade the other person from having benefit from you, and he's forbidden, and you're forbidden from him, so when you go into that water, you're using his water. In other words, Rav Nachman saying it is shutfim. It is shutfim. They are partners, but depends how much water you're using. If you're using all the water because you're bathing, then it's a problem. But if you're not using all the water, then it's fine. Yeah.
What's the answer?
Don't worry about it, John. I'm not here. Don't worry. Focus.
Okay. And what are we dealing with here? Lamales. To fill it up because you're just filling up 1 cup. Mar medidei kamim marle, mar medidei kamim marle, and each one is filling up from his own portion. Each one has a portion of that well. The whole world has a portion of that well, but they're just taking. And if you add in the concept of breira, then it's excellent because they're taking their own things. Now, what we just did is we've just set up Rav Nachman that he holds that the well is shutfim. And the way of resolving the problem is that we introduced breira. Now the Gemara says, "V'sav Rav Nachman yesh breira." Rav Nachman holds a breira that you can take out. You can take out from the well, and it's considered that it was always yours retroactively. But there's a problem. V'atnan, we have a Mishnah: Hachin v'shutfim keshachevim bekalbain, p'tur meiser behema, keshachevim meiser behema, p'tur min hakalbain. Back in Shkalim, if you remember the complications of Shkalim. Here, there was a little service fee, processing fee that went along. Right, the house always wins. That went along with the half a shekel. So the only time that you didn't have to give that kalbain is that little processing fee, is if a father paid for his sons. But if 2 partners gave the shkalim, that's very similar to a father paying for his sons, paying together. If 2 people gave the half a shekel together, they still have to give the kalbain each, 2 kalbain. But if a father pays for his sons, they only have to give one kalbain, 1 processing fee.
Okay. Now we have another rule that Meiser Behema doesn't apply to partners that own the animals. We have a Gemara that excludes Kol Peter Shega Behema Shiyir Lecha. It can only be owned by one, not by two. The Gemara says that even though that pasuk is by Bechar, but by Bechar it doesn't make sense, so it has to be talking about Meiser. So Meiser Behema doesn't apply to partners. So the Mishnah says like this: brothers that are partners, if they have to pay the kalbine.
Wow.
Now, how are they?
Wow.
How are they partners? How are they partners? The partners because the father passed away. Now, if they have to pay the kalbine, that's because they've already divided up the inheritance and they rejoined as partners. If they have to pay the kalbine. Because if they didn't separate, then they would be pater from the kalbine. So we're saying now, when they're chayavim bekalbine, then peturim and meiser behema, then they're real partners, and they're exempt from meiser behema. As we said, partners don't have to give meiser behema a tenth of the animals. It's a carbon. Kisha chayavim meiser behema. If they're chayav to give meiser behema, then why would they be chayav to give meiser behema if they're partners? The reason is because they're not real partners. They just never divided up the inheritance. It's still an estate. That's not considered partners. That's considered one ownership under one fund, under one estate. So then, if that's the case, then Peter Mina Kalban, then they're exempt from the Kalban. Why? Because it's like the father is paying for the sons, which there was an exemption from the Kalban. So far, we didn't see anything yet. Ravanan says, what would be a real division? We're talking about the brothers divided up and then they rejoined. So if they separated, they say, you take the goats and I'll take the sheep. Another one said, you take the sheep, I'll take the goats. But if they divided, they said, you take half the Gediyim, you take half the Gediyim. And you take half the sheep, I take half the sheep. We say, that this was his original. There was never really a division here. If they now go back together, it's not considered that they was really divided because this was originally how it was meant for them, Breira. When he takes it, that was his original portion. When they put it back together, they never purchased it off each other. See, there's a difference if they purchased it off each other or if this was the original inheritance. If this is original inheritance, so it was always in this mixture and half of it was yours and we knew which half, we only know afterwards. So when they rejoin together, then they're actually rejoined. Rav Nachman Amar, Nachman says, "Afilu chalka gedim keneged gedim utlaim keneged tlaim. Einar mezeh chalka amagir mishar rishayna lekach." We don't say that they actually had it divided. That we say retroactively that was his original portion. Reuven and Shimon here. That the even if they dividing half the goats each gets half the goat, half the sheep each gets half the sheep. Even if they're dividing it like that, we don't say that this wasn't the original inheritance. We say that there was a purchase that took place here. And he says, I own, let's say, all everything a little bit, and you are in exchange for what I'm going to take, you can take my part. And there's actually a purchase, a sale that takes place because of this exchange. Now, which means that Rav Nachman doesn't hold of Breira. Breira would tell me that whatever you take in the end, that's what was originally yours. You're not a purchaser. Nachman doesn't hold a Breira, and I have no way of resolving how they could be partners and nevertheless taking from the water.
How would Rav Nachman get that switch in the bid?
Yeah.
So there's no brainer there.
Yeah, but there's no Breira and a sale. That's a new deal. Every time there's a new deal, you don't say Breira. Here we're talking about that the father passed away and the inheritance goes to the children, but what exactly? So afterwards, when they divide it up, they say, oh yeah, that was originally yours. Or do we say, look, it belongs like this. If you take this, I'll take that, and you take that, I'll take this, and we'll make it's a real transaction. Rav Nachman says that it is a real transaction.
If that's the case, then he doesn't hold a brera of retroactive designation. It's not because he owns it, everyone owns it. It could be. It could be. But then I lose the brera conversation. Right.
Or yes, no.
Right.
As, because I'm taking it on Saturday, it's as if I designated it.
Right. Now, when it comes to Yerusha, I think it's clear that everyone owns it. Because the question is, how does the division work? Do you divide it as a lekeach, as a transaction with a purchase? And then that would affect, like we mentioned before, yovel and all of that. Or do we say that was always yours? So listen to what the Gemara answers. You have to say that the well is hefker. Hefker. It's ownerless. What does that do? That should tell me that when the person picks it up, remember what the question is? One person picks it up and gives it to his friend. So if it's hefker, then we say you can't pick it up for someone else, because what about the rest of the world that had the rights to that could have picked it up? And you're a third party. You don't belong mixing into everyone else's things, so you can't really pick it up for someone else. If it's hefker, then you could take it for yourself, no problem. And then you can give it. But when you take it for yourself, it acquires your tchum. Okay, so how does Rav Nachman say that it goes after the tchum of the person that you gave it to? It was an exchange that took place, and it's already yomtiv. It's already one person's. Two ways of learning this Gemara. The way Rashi wants to learn it is when I pick up an item from my friend, Rav Sheshis would say, kana. It goes after the one that picked it up. I acquire it before I give it to him.
This is whole or
Talking about on Yom Tov.
I thought you can't make a kid.
It's talking about the water that's in the well that I'm on the road somewhere. I'm taking the water. How far can I walk with it? Because I picked it up and I give it to him. So my tchum was back there. My erev was back there. His tchum is down there. So whose tchum is it? So it depends. Rav Sheshes says that when I picked it up, I actually acquire it before I give it to him, and then he acquires it. And Rav Nachman Amar Loikana. Rav Nachman says that I don't acquire it, and it just goes over to him. I'm just like a conduit or something. I'm not involved. I'm just the shliach, and I pass it over to him. The kinyan takes place when he gets it. That's one pshat. There's another pshat here. Other pshat is that Mar Savar Kana, that Rav Nachman holds that he acquires it immediately, the friend, and it's Mishin Ismalalai. Mar Savar Lai Kana, Rav Sheshes says that he doesn't acquire it, and therefore it becomes mine. It's the same thing. Now the problem is that in Bab Metzia there's a machlekes, Magbia Metzia lechaver kana chaver or not, and Rav Nachman has an opinion over there, and it doesn't fit with saying that kana, because Rav Nachman holds like kana. So if you learn it the other way, it fits better. Anyway, two ways of reading this, but it's the same concept. Okay, we have a new Mishnah. Mishaya Pereisav Be'er Acheres Be'ervu Bnei Oiseh Ha'ir Lavietzli Pereisav. Someone happens to be not at home, and his fruits are in his hometown. So he's out of the city, 4,000 amas approximately. So the people of that city make an eruv, and they want to bring him his fruits. They make an eruv somewhere in the center between the owner of the fruits and the city where the fruits are in. So the Mishnah says, Lo yavi elai, they can't bring it to him. Why? Because their eruv
doesn't work for his fruits. Remember we said that if there's an owner, it goes after the owner. Now, these fruits are not in, the owner would need to make an Erev to allow those fruits to move anywhere. The owner didn't make the Erev. So those fruits are stuck where they are. Vim Erev who? But if this person made the Erev, then Peres of Kamayo, then those fruits can go wherever he can go. Okay? So the possessions follow the owner's Erev.
Why can't you say Zachar? And they were tough shit.
Yeah.
And then you rely on
Right.
someone.
You're right. In certain cases, yes. But an Erev is not necessarily Zachin because maybe the guy wants to go the other way. You're limiting. Misha Zimenes Layarchem, let's say someone invited guests. You can't give them packages to take home. Unless you gave it to them before Yom Tov, but they weren't there before Yom Tov. So you gave it to someone else to acquire it for them. And there would be, that's only as chus, if they own extra things.
Why couldn't why you already marked it to them in your mind?
Right.
It wasn't yours anymore.
You can be marking it to them, but the way you would do that is you would hand it to someone else and say, acquire this for them. That's what it seems. You have to make a kinyan. So when you give it over to them, you can give someone a gift without them agreeing to it, as long as there's no detriment to that. Then whatever Erev they have, they can take. They were going to their home after the meal, which was out of the tchum for the balabayas, for the host, but it was in the tchum of the guest. So it would have to belong to the guest before Yom Tov came in. Itmar. We have a statement. Someone gives fruits. He deposits fruits to his friend to watch. Okay. Whose Erev does it go under? Rav says it goes under the Erev of the Shomer. And Shmuel says it goes after the Erev of the owner. Rav Shmuel does the Tamayo. Let's say Rav and Shmuel follow their reasoning in Baba Kama. The Tanan, we have a Mishnah. If someone takes an ox and puts it into his friend's property, and on the way in, if he asked him, do you mind, can I put it there? The friend says, yeah, go ahead, put it in there. So does that mean that the friend just took responsibility? So if the friend agreed to let it stay there, so the friend just accepted responsibility. And if there's any damages, the friend is responsible just by saying yes. You have to be careful. You say yes, you let him in there. It's like 1 second. This is like a whole liability now. Rebbe says, you're not chayiv until you say the owner of this property is not chayiv, of this courtyard isn't chayiv, until he says, bring it in and I'll watch it. If he didn't say, add those words and I'll watch it, then he's not chayiv. Okay, now this is what we're looking for. Remember we had a machlekes Rav and Shmuel about someone that deposits fruits by his friend. Whose possession is it under? Rav says it belongs to the shomer. In other words, we're talking about the tchum, that it belongs to the shomer enough that it has the limitations of the shomer, the watchman, his limitations. Rav says halacha kedivrei chachamim. Rav paskins in Baba Kama that when you brought the ox in, by just saying come in, the shomer, the owner of the courtyard, has already taken responsibility. That would be Rav's opinion, that by saying put it here, he's taken full responsibility. It becomes like his, but regarding tchumen. Shmuel amar halacha k'Rebbe. Shmuel says halacha is like Rebbe, where the person doesn't take responsibility until he actually says, I'm taking responsibility. So Shmuel says it belongs to the possession of the owner. It matches perfectly. So say that their conversation here about the tchum is exactly the way that Rebbe and the Chachamim would say, based on the way they just paskin. So in other words,
the Chachamim would say that regarding Tchumen, it belongs to the Shomer. And Rebbe would say that it belongs to the owner. Amalach Rav. Gemara doesn't want to do this. He wants to limit Machlekes Rebbe and the Chachamim to Baba Kama. And over here, Rav and Shmuel have an independent argument that does not involve Rebbe and the Chachamim, and both Rebbe and the Chachamim could hold like either opinion. Amalach Rav and Adam Refil Rebbe. Rebbe can really hold like me as well. So why over there did he say that you didn't accept possession, responsibility? So Adkan like Rebbe Hasam Eladim Bestama like Kibala Netirusa. He probably didn't want a responsibility of the ox. Aval Hacha, Kibala Netirusa, but over here, he said he's going to watch it. He was a mafkid. So he said he's going to watch it if it comes under his possession. Over there, he never said. Shmuel Amar Anadam Refila Rabban Shmuel says that even the rabbis would say like me that it belongs to the owner regarding Tchumen. This is why. Adkan lekam Rabban Hasam lichnei leinish tenekam tura b'shusei the Baal Chatzar. He would really like that the Baal Chatzar should take responsibility. So therefore, Paskin like Shmuel, Paskin like Rebbe. And the owner would really like it, but just the person never accepted it. The imazik leilai mechayev, because he doesn't want to be responsible, but he would love if the person would take responsibility. What does he gain if the fruits are fully in possession of the shomer? He doesn't gain anything by that. Over there, he would gain. Okay, so even the Rabbanon that say that there's possession that takes that the responsibility that the responsibility is given over to the shomer immediately. That's because the person really wants that responsibility given over. But by us, he doesn't gain anything by giving that responsibility of the fruits over. So therefore, it still belongs to the possession of the owner, and it has the limitations of the owner. Okay, Tanan, we have a Mishnah. The Erev who? If he made the Erev, we're talking about that his fruits were in the city and the people of the city made the Erev. It doesn't help to bring the fruits. But if he made the Erev, Perosiv Kamayo, then it follows him. Now, 1 second. Where were the fruits? They were in the city. Now, the city is like the shomer. But if you say it follows according to the one that it was deposited in, which is the opinion of Rav, what is the difference if he made an Erev? It's in the city. The city is the shomer. Should belong to the limitations of the city. It would only belong to the limitations of the watchman or the city if the city took full responsibility for it. But if the way it was given over to the watchman, they said like this, they said, look, I'm giving you a corner to keep it in. That's where it's going to stay. It's not really like becoming in my possession. Place it in that corner. So that's really your corner. That's your corner. So I don't have the responsibility. It doesn't go under my possession. If you just hand it to him and you don't care where he keeps it, he puts it in his pocket and he can put it anywhere where he wants. So fine. But once there's a designated corner, then you're not even supposed to move it from there. Then that becomes the owner, the one that's depositing. That corner becomes his place. Tashma. If someone has guests and he wants to give them a package to take home after the meal, so he shouldn't give it to them because they didn't make an Erev. I'm sorry. He shouldn't give it to them because the Erev wasn't on the food. It was on, they have their own Erev. But if he has given them the food before Yom Tov, then whatever Erev they have would apply to this food as well, and they can take the package home. Now, who was watching this food? There was a shomer, the host, right? So if we follow Rab's opinion, that says that it goes after the host. What does he gain by giving it to them? He's still a shomer. It's a good question. It's as if he designated a location for it. So it becomes, even though he's a shomer, but it's as if he gave them a special place to hold that food, and it's considered under their possession. All right. Zika shiny probably. Or we can say that when you give it to them, that's much more than just if they gave it to you to watch. If someone gives it to you to watch, then there's a question, how much did he give it to you? But when you're giving it to someone else, you're fully giving it to them. And that means it's taking over, it's being taken over by them. Rav Chana bar Chanilai, Tala Bisr ba'aber dedasha. Rav Chana bar Chanilai, he hung his meat by the house of his host on the other side of the bridge, and he lived in a different city. Now he hung the meat up. I guess I don't know if that would to dry it or to whatever it is. Now it's Yom Tif and he wants to get the meat. Asal kami de Rav Huna. Amalei I atalis zilshkal. If you were the one that hung it up, remember we're discussing here. If there's a watchman, under whose domain does it go? Does it the owner's domain or the watchman's domain? So he goes to Rav Huna. Rav Huna is a second generation Amira, student of Rav. Goes to Rav Huna. Rav Huna tells him that if you were the one that hung it up, then you could take it. But if they hung it up for you, then you can't take it. The Gemara says, but is he allowed to take it if he hung it up? Rav Huna is a student of Rav, probably the main student of Rav. Rav says, doesn't go after the owner, it goes after the one that's the shaymer, the place where it was placed. You can't go and take it. That it has the limitations. You made an Erev, but they didn't make an Erev. They can't get they can't. This food has their limitations. You can't access that food. My answer: Shani the other side of the bridge. It was as if, I guess, I don't know. I guess it's like as if he designated a place. All right. Amalei Rav Hillel l'Ravashi. Looks like we're going down a few generations. The Inutali Leila Shakel. What's going on over here? Something's funny. If they hung it for him, so he's not allowed to take it. But Shmuel says, if you have someone that sells meat, any person that purchases that meat can take it. This is no worse than that. Why can't it be that they had him in mind when they hung it? Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Another question. The Inutali Leila Shakel, he can't take it. Rab Daisa said that if there was only one shepherd in town, it goes after the shepherd because they had intention that it was going to go to him on Yom Tov. So what's the problem if they hung it? Amalei Ravashi Rav Kana. Another question. The Inutali Leila Shakel, if they hung it, he's not allowed to take it. Rav Chana bar Chanilai. We have it's clear that it goes after the owners. Alashani Rav Chana bar Chanilai the Gavar Rabbahu b'tarid b'shmaite. Rav Chana bar Chanilai was a great person. He was always thinking about Torah. V'achi Karmelei, and this is what Rav Huna meant. If you're the one that hung it, then you probably lifted up your eyes. You looked at it while you were hanging it, and you didn't lose concentration from it. So zil shkal, you can now go and take it. And he's actually mixing in another halacha here that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, and it has to do with basar shenesalim and ayin. Meat that wasn't being watched could be got exchanged with non-kosher meat. So if you looked at it, you'll be able to recognize it when you take it again, and you won't have that problem. But if they hung it up, then there was no one that was concentrating about this meat the whole time, and it becomes under the status of basar shenesalim, under that category, and you can't eat the meat. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Huna was the one that sent the meat in the funny cut to his wife, who would send it with a non-Jew. Is that Rav Huna as well?
Triangle like pizza.
The triangle, yeah. So this is interesting that he's very like attached to this halacha.
Yeah, I have like at my job, we have like a community fridge. You don't know, like other people are like taking my food or things like that. So like I tie it in like a plastic bag, you know.
Right.
That's just
Do a
what
double
I
knot.
heard. Yeah, yeah.
Double knot. Yeah. Why? Oh.
I have to tell this to the professor. Naftali said that if Karl Marx would learn this, it would be different. And talking about everyone owning things, or no one owning things. Okay. Will we have time tonight to learn? Let's learn a little bit further, and then tonight we'll finish it off. You're not allowed to give to drink or to shech animals that are on the outside, that are in the desert. Midbaris just means wild. You know, they're not under your, they're not domesticated, because it has to be designated that they're yours if you're going to shecht it. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to shecht, but it has to be, someone had to like decide that it's going to be shechted beforehand. That means home, bias. Or it could mean an Aramaic word, bus, means to lodge, to sleep. Bus means to sleep, but it may be even associated with bias as well. Okay, so domesticated animals you can water, you can not water, you can give to drink and shech. Eloina biases. What is a domesticated animal? Halanis be'ir. Those that come home at night, they come back, and during the day they go out, but at night they come back. Midbaris halanis be'efer. They sleep in the meadow, marsh, whatever. Where it says, why do you have to mention the giving to drink? So it says, it's coming to tell me something significant. Turns out that if you want to skin the animal, if you give it to drink first, the skin comes off easier, because we learned this in Masechtas Tamid, that they would give the drink in a kaishal zav. That we said that it skins easier if it has it's not dehydrated. Dan Rabbanan. Let's see. Okay, let's leave it over here. So tonight, where's the siyum going to be?
What time?
Okay.
Thank you.
About 20 minutes. Okay. Then we have a siyum tonight.
What time?
What
time?
After Ma'ariv. And Mincha is 10 minutes before Shkia. I don't know what that means though.